Hello, my name is Lindsay Reed, and I teach fifth grade English Language Arts. This is my 11th artifact addressing Standard 6.2, Criterion 20, Managing Technology and Learning. I am using the lesson plan I developed for the creative computing assignment that I implemented with my fifth grade English Language Arts class to show how I manage the use of technology and student learning strategies in a variety of environments such as digital platforms, virtual environments, hands-on makerspaces, or in the field. In order to manage the use of technology, I make sure students have a clear understanding of the guidelines presented to them in the student handbook. Students are expected to follow the guidelines for the use of technology presented to them in the student handbook at the beginning of the year. Students are expected to stay on task and collaborate respectfully with their peers. I also have flexible seating set up in my classroom so that students can choose where they sit and have a bit of voice and choice in that, work with their peers in a manner that is best for them. I do make sure that students are encouraged to ask peers for support during projects. I'll encourage students to use the ask three before me strategy. I also encourage students to be peer helpers once they have shown mastery of a skill. I think this is a great way to have a variety of leadership opportunities in the classroom. Students have been taught basic troubleshooting for technology issues we see in the classroom. This includes simply refreshing the program or closing out of it and reloading it, restarting the computer, asking a peer for help. As for the creative computing project, we used a program called Scratch, and they can troubleshoot by testing out their code frequently throughout their project to check for mistakes before getting too far in the project. This way, students can correct any errors in the code early on. I also provide the links to the tutorial videos that can be found on the Scratch website. The links can also be accessed through the student resources page in their Canvas course for ELA. We spend a great deal of time at the beginning of the year on digital citizenship lessons to ensure students understand the importance of using technology appropriately, respectfully, and safely. Student computers are monitored by the teacher using GoGuardian to ensure students are focused on the task. I can pull up my individual classes in GoGuardian and I can see exactly what their active tabs are and even their background tabs to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Students have been made aware of the consequences for their inappropriate behavior for technology to go ahead and try to prevent some of those issues. Hello, my name is Lindsay Reed, and I teach fifth grade English Language Arts. This is my 11th artifact addressing Standard 6.3 Criterion 21, Design and Computational Thinking. I am using the lesson plan I developed for the creative computing assignment that I implemented with my fifth grade English Language Arts class to show how I created learning opportunities that challenge students to use a design process and a computational thinking to innovate and solve problems. For this project, I had students do a digital storytelling project in Scratch. I used the design process creative learning spiral. So students had the different sections: imagine, create, play, share, and reflect. Before starting the project, I showed students an exemplar that I created in Scratch so they could see the expectation for the final project. I think it was very helpful for them to see the exemplar so they could make a good choice for the book that they were going to summarize, something that wasn't too terribly difficult so that they could kind of start with a little bit easier task. Students read several different short stories before deciding which one they wanted to use for their summary assignment in Scratch. I can encourage them to use a short story to keep their summary short since this was their first time. Most students chose to use Epic as the resource to find a story. They wrote the summary in their writing journal first, jotted down some ideas for characters in a setting that they could use in Scratch. And then they chose, most of the students chose backgrounds from Scratch, but there were a few that wanted to create their own. And then same with their characters. Most of the students chose characters that were already in Scratch. Some of them drew their own. Um, most of the students picked up the coding pretty quickly. I did have two students who became very frustrated during the coding process that needed additional support. For the computational thinking, students used algorithms to create the code as a step-by-step instructions for the characters to follow. This is what makes the different sprites move, the backgrounds change, the items appear and disappear, and the sounds and recordings play at the right time. Students also used decomposition to work step by step to complete the task. They started by choosing or creating characters in a setting they would represent their book that would represent their book appropriately. Then they created the algorithms for each sprite individually, and so on. They used pattern recognition. Students saw patterns in their code that were repeated for each sprite. Once they saw the patterns or the parts of the code that were repeated, they were more efficient in creating each chunk of code and just making the small changes. Students used abstraction. Students focused on identifying the important part of the problem without all the details rather than fixing the code in several different places. They could look at like for a fix in one place. And then the debugging and testing, they tested their code regularly and created different algorithms for each sprite to make sure that they could make corrections in the code if needed. Throughout this process, students were engaged and excited about doing something different to show mastery of ELA standards. They did a great job choosing appropriate books to summarize in Scratch. They really put a lot of thought into choosing a book that they would be able to create characters, a setting, and algorithms that would show the summary to the audience. Students took much longer than I expected to complete this project, so to improve the design process, I would start with an assignment in Scratch that focused on just learning how to use the program before bringing in ELA standards. Once students got the hang of creating the algorithms, the process went much smoother. I think the planning process would be better for this particular assignment if students had some experience using Scratch. Some failures, I experienced some failures in the planning part of the assignment. I did not realize how helpful it would be for students to have background knowledge of coordinate planes. Because I teach only ELA, I assumed they had done some work with graphing and math, but fifth grade doesn't do that until the end of the year. So I found myself having to go back and show them how changing the X and the Y coordinates makes the sprites move to where they want to be. Now that students do not have this background knowledge, I would plan a lesson to address these concepts before planning a project that brings in multiple steps and standards. Because students did not have the prior knowledge or experience using Scratch, the tutorial videos weren't as helpful as they could have been. I believe these failures are directly related to why those two students became so frustrated needing additional support. Hello, my name is Lindsay Reed, and I teach fifth grade English Language Arts. This is my 11th artifact addressing Standard 6.4, Criterion 2, Creativity. I am using the lesson plan I developed for the creative computing assignment that I implemented with my fifth grade English Language Arts class to show how I modeled and nurtured creativity and creative expression to communicate ideas, knowledge, or connections. I demonstrate creativity and creative problem solving by showing my students how I summarized a short story using digital storytelling on Scratch. I shared with them my design process using a slideshow for each of the components. I showed students how to access the tutorial videos in the program and gave them some time to practice making codes to move their sprites around. Students share their projects in the classroom in groups of two and were given opportunities to receive feedback. The students were able to use creative expression because they could choose which story they wanted to use. They could also choose which characters and settings they wanted to use in Scratch. If they were more comfortable with recording themselves, a lot of them chose to record themselves as the digital storytelling and changing their voices and things like that. For the students who are not as comfortable recording themselves or videoing, they chose to use speech bubbles and type into the speech bubbles to show their summary. They can even change their voice a bit. Um, I wanted them to share their work with others using our Canvas learning management system because that's what we use daily. But our county will not let us use the Scratch website. It's blocked, so we are able to in the Software Center download the Scratch app. So we had trouble figuring out how to get a link using the app instead of the website. So my original plan for them to post it into Canvas didn't work. But what we ended up doing was setting up their computers and doing kind of like a gallery walk where they could see the different Scratch projects, and then they were assigned to one peer that they would provide feedback in a discussion board in Canvas. So that worked out just fine. Um, Overall, I think the project was really good. I think the kids really enjoyed it. There are definitely some little changes that I would make for the next time that I implement this, but overall, I think it was very successful.